The previous Cold War ended in 1991 with the collapse of the Soviet Union, but the promised utopia of global peace never came. No, the West soon found itself bogged down in a forever war against a new enemy that they may have created: Islamic fundamentalism. The problem is that Islam is a really diverse and gigantic world with a lot of very different factions, ethnicities, denominations, goals, and methods. Hamas, in particular, the faction currently waging war against Israel, is an armed Sunni organization that is fighting for a Palestinian state and an independent Gaza. But let's be honest here. Israel isn't that concerned about Hamas. The greatest threat to Israel's national security and its worst enemy is none other than an armed Lebanese militant group called Hezbollah. Who is Hezbollah? Where'd they come from? And why are they aggroing Israel harder than Hamas? Strap in, because this is probably the most serious video that we've ever done on Knowledge Raiders. People tend to assume that Lebanon is just another Islamic country because of its location, but it's significantly more complicated than that. Hell, Lebanon's technically a democracy. This tiny country, about 2/3 the size of Connecticut, is bursting with different religions from Islam, Christianity, and even Judaism. Get this, one of its most popular religions is Christianity, and its president has pretty much always been a Maronite Christian. Lebanon has this really unique government system of multiconfessionalism called a national pact. So, you know how the West has separation of powers? Well, the national pact is separation of powers with a religious quota. The president is hard-coded to be a Maronite Christian, the prime minister is hard-coded to be a Sunni Muslim, the speaker of parliament is a Shia Muslim, the deputy prime minister and the speaker of parliament must be a Greek Orthodox Christian, and the chief of general staff must be a Druze. There are 18 different religious factions recognized by the government, and this was the only way to keep the country from tearing itself apart because they're pretty equally distributed demographically. To make matters worse, members of the Lebanese parliament are hard-coded to be split 50-50 between Christians and Muslims. There's none of that two-party nonsense here. Each party is specifically there to represent its religious base. Hezbollah, specifically, is a major Shia Islamic party holding 13 parliamentary seats in the 2022 election. So, no, Hezbollah isn't just your average armed militia terrorist group or whatever. I mean, I guess you could call them that, but they're also a major established political party in the Lebanese government. Here's the kicker. The central government isn't strong or influential enough to properly control southern Lebanon, so Hezbollah pretty much runs the place there. Even the local civilians strongly support Hezbollah over the central authorities, which means that there are basically two governments somehow coexisting in the same country. To understand how this ridiculous situation even happened in the first place, we gotta take a quick detour to understand the history of Lebanon. Alright, so pretty much every single other country in the region is dominated by Sunni Islam except for, Israel, obviously. But how come there are all these religions still alive in Lebanon? Well, that's because all sorts of empires and religions were in charge of it at one point in time. Geographically speaking, this place was a buzzing trade hub, a crossroad of civilizations from the ancient days. The Greeks and Romans called this place Phoenicia. Ring a bell from English class? The Phoenician alphabet you're looking at right now was invented here, in the birthplace of Hezbollah. The Bible called this location Canaan, and the legendary Carthage started as a humble city in modern-day Lebanon. The Babylonians took over for a bit, then the Persians, and then even Alexander the Great before finally getting conquered by the Roman Empire. When Christianity became a thing, this entire region rode the wave and became Christian under the Patriarch of Antioch. But here comes the 7th century, and with it, Islam. The expansion of the Islamic Empire rips away the vast East Mediterranean Sea and North African lands from the East Roman Empire. Obviously, this means that the entirety of the region did a complete 180 to convert to Islam and speak Arabic, except for one particularly devoted group that hid in the Lebanese mountains to preserve their faith: the Maronite Christians. They were so committed, in fact, that they survive to this day and are one of the most dominant branches of Christianity in the region. Well, the Maronite Christians weren't the only refugees hiding in the Lebanese mountains by the 12th century. The Crusades happened, and all sorts of misfit religions fled to Lebanon to avoid persecution from one religious zealot military or the other. The Shia Islam-based Druze and Alawites are probably the best examples here. Fuck, man, even I'm getting confused as I'm saying this. TLDR, Lebanon had a long history that changed hands countless times, and its trademark mountainous geography led to a whole bunch of religious hiding, squatting, and coexisting here for thousands of years. The Crusades eventually ran out of steam, and Lebanon, along with the rest of the Near East, returned to the control of Sunni Islam. By the 16th century, the Ottoman Empire finally killed off the Eastern Roman Empire and became the rightful ruler of the vast majority of the Islam world, including Lebanon. That being said, the Lebanon region was pretty far out there and has a mountainous terrain, so directly ruling over would be inconvenient as hell. Therefore, the Ottoman Empire let the Druze Emirates do the dirty work and left Lebanon as kind of an indirect vassal state, if you will. The plan was to keep Lebanon weak by pitting the Christians and the Muslims against each other, and it worked. There were countless violent clashes between the Maronite Christian peasants and the Druze Muslim ruling class throughout the centuries. That being said, because the Maronite Christians were crucial in facilitating trade with the majority Christian Western countries, they were somewhat of a protected class and managed to survive reasonably well under the rule of the Ottoman Empire. You think the history of Lebanon is a complete clusterfuck so far? It gets worse. By the 19th century, the Ottoman Empire is basically a dead man walking, and its major cash cow territories like Egypt and Greece start their version of Brexit. France comes out of nowhere and claims that they have no choice but to intervene to guarantee the independence of the Maronite Christians. In 1861, Lebanon officially becomes a government of autonomous Maronite Christians, otherwise known as yet another colony of France. The Ottomans finally died during World War II, which is exactly what the British and French have been waiting for. They eagerly pounce on whatever land they can get their hands on, resulting in the fucked up borders in the Middle East you see today. Britain gobbles up Iraq, Egypt, and Palestine, while France takes Syria on top of its Lebanon. This is when France makes an oopsie that will have consequences until today. You see, Lebanon used to only refer to the land around the Lebanese mountains, where the Maronite Christians used to live. But France just made Lebanon bigger and added a whole bunch of random land from Syria to pad the borders of Greater Lebanon, or the Lebanon we know today. So, why is this bad, you ask? Well, the native Maronite Christians and Islam Druze were barely getting along as it was, but all of a sudden, all sorts of other religions entered the equation and fucked up this delicate balance like a grenade. Props to the French, this whole divide and conquer thing worked out well, but that's how you get a region that's so destabilized, it literally spawns a Hezbollah. Considering how the newly annexed territories are mostly Islamic, wouldn't this mean that there's just an overwhelming Islam majority in Lebanon? Well, yes, but believing in Islam doesn't mean that you automatically get along with each other. The number one religion in Lebanon was actually Maronite Christianity because Islam was split among Shia and Sunni. As you probably know, Sunni and Shia Muslims tend to absolutely hate each other to the point where they might as well be considered different religions, so getting them on the same side was basically impossible. Believe it or not, the religion worst off here was none other than Shia Islam. I mean, they were in the top 3 in Lebanon population-wise, but that's basically it. The Maronite Christians were sponsored by the French to be the ruling class. Sunni Islam makes about 90% of the Muslim world and has a lot of friends from the Ottoman era, but Shia Islam? Well, they were always a minority and were persecuted to hell and back during the Ottoman Empire because of it. Life under the French was no different. Shia Islam in Lebanon was just another pawn for France to sacrifice. Now, take all this into consideration because shit's about to get wild in World War II. France pretty much insta-GG's out, and all of its colonies suddenly realize that there's nothing stopping them from being free. Lebanon too becomes independent in 1943. The only way to keep everybody in Lebanon from killing each other for religious reasons was to implement the aforementioned National Pact. The one where the president's hard-coded to be a Maronite Christian, the prime minister is hard-coded to be a Sunni Muslim, the speaker of parliament is a Shia Muslim, and so on, remember? Western democracy with a sectarian twist is a pretty weird concept to grasp, but Lebanon didn't really have much of a choice because the alternative was literally battle royale. Yeah, there were some bumps in the road, but hey, this system worked surprisingly well for a bit. In fact, Lebanon was considered one of the better countries in the Near East until the 60s. Dubai and Abu Dhabi may come to mind now, but believe it or not, Lebanon was considered the financial hub of the Middle East back then. Hell, the Lebanese capital Beirut was so successful that it used to be called the Paris of the Middle East, with swarms of tourists coming to visit. Despite all the prosperity in Lebanon, life was still pretty shit for the Shia Muslims, the vast majority of whom didn't even have access to electricity. Yeah, Lebanon was going to the moon, but Shia Muslims were completely left behind. Even the hard-coded Shia Speaker of Parliament was a pretty useless formality of a job, and the few successful or rich Shia Muslims abandoned their tribe at first chance to be with the Maronite Christians or Sunnis. Considering how Hezbollah is a Shia Islamic organization, you can probably see where this is going. The most fundamental source of contention was the fact that demographics change over time. I mean, Lebanon's National Pact originally split up its power based on population, right? So it would seem logical to, keep it updated and reflect the changes of the people. But nope. Muslims, on average, tend to have a lot of babies, and it was no different here. The Maronite Christians, however, just kind of ignored this and kept filibustering the redistribution of power. That's why Lebanon is the only country in the UN that never conducted an official census since its independence. This is where a legendary man called Musa al-Sadr steps up to unite the Lebanese Shia Muslims. Al-Sadr is an Iranian-born Lebanese Islamic scholar who had deep ancestral roots in Lebanon. He moves to Lebanon in 1950 and does such good work for the rights of the Lebanese Shia Muslims that the president just grants him citizenship. Finally, in 1968, al-Sadr founds the first Shia Muslim political organization called the Mal Movement, and things were finally looking up for the Lebanese Shias. They were united, and at last were being heard by Lebanon. Unfortunately, every other country in the region was entering a state of utter chaos. We might cover this in future videos, but the Third Arab-Israeli War had just erupted. Yeah. Israel managed to 1v3 Egypt, Jordan, and Syria and win. Tons of Palestinian refugees were flooding into the south border of Lebanon. Well, what does that mean? The Muslim population sees a drastic increase, which the already outnumbered Maronite Christians absolutely do not like. To make matters even worse, the Palestinian Liberation Organization gets exiled from Jordan in 1970, so they too flock to southern Lebanon and bring thousands of their armed soldiers along for the ride. Unwanted refugees in your country are one thing, but having armed soldiers just squat in your territory as if they own the place? Things are getting spicy. The guerrilla wars between Israel and Palestine continue to rage on in the meantime, turning their home southern Lebanon into a complete war zone. From the perspective of the Shia Muslims, this was complete and utter bullshit. The Palestinians are Sunni Muslims, right? Why do the already oppressed Shia Muslims have to suffer? A normal, functioning country might have done something about this. But we're talking about the birthplace of Hezbollah here, so Lebanon just ignores this crisis. That land belongs to the poor and useless Shias anyway. Not my problem, they thought. They thought wrong. The Israelis and the Palestinians keep escalating the crisis, trapped in the cycle of violence that still exists to this day, leading to more and more brazen attacks in southern Lebanon and even in the capital, Beirut. The Shias finally had enough. In 1973, Musa al-Sadr rages against the incompetence of the Lebanese government, picks up his AK-47, and officially declares that the Shias are at war. The problem is that the Shias weren't alone here. The Maronites, Sunnis, and even the Orthodox Church were all arming themselves and getting ready for war. Every single religion now had an armed militia, and the horrible 15-year-long battle royale free-for-all that we know as the Lebanese Civil War was about to kick off. Oh, you really won't want to miss our next episode. This has been David Bradford from Knowledge Raiders, and thank you for watching.